Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Last of Us presentation. So, at the time of me recording this, there is the two video games out and just one season of the TV show. So, that's all that I will be talking about here. I know that season two of The Last of Us is coming out in early 2025, but at the time of me making this, that's all I have. And rest assured, I'm sure that I will have quite a lot to say about season two of the show. So I'm sure that I will make another PowerPoint about season two or add on to this one. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah. Okay, so I will be first talking about the first Last of Us game, and then I will talk about the show. So the first Last of Us was the very first big boy video game that I ever played that wasn't Mario, Lego, or Portal. My dad got a PS4 for himself to play Doom 2016, and then in typical my dad fashion, he played the game for about 15 minutes, got confused, didn't know how to turn up the brightness, and then gave up. Claire then took up Doom at the age of like 12. Took her a literal full year to play that game. It fundamentally changed her as a person, and now she is who she is. And then for me, my first big dip into video games was with The Last of Us 1. I had the PS4s already, so I was just Googling what games were the best. The Last of Us was on a lot of people's lists, and so I said, okay. I had seen PewDiePie play some of it, but not a ton, so I was mostly going in blind. And I genuinely didn't know that stories could be told like that, so I absolutely loved it. Gameplay was simple enough for me, who really couldn't aim a gun, to finish the game. Good aim assist and a lot of patience were my best friends when I first played. Playing that game really kicked off me being insane because I then played games like Inside and Firewatch, and more importantly, Uncharted 4, it's a real shame that that game isn't remembered quite as fondly as The Last of Us 1, because it rocks. And I don't really remember too much about my first playthrough of The Last of Us, as I have since played the game like 5 or 6 times, and the early playthroughs all kind of blend together in my brain. The way I'm interested in talking about this game is more in comparison to the show, because I feel like the differences are interesting because they are both subtle and obvious. Okay, so just getting that out there, I like the show. I think it's a good adaptation. A lot of love and care went into this show, and it definitely is evident. There's a lot that I like about the show, mostly in the things that they added. My favorite episode of the whole show was episode 3 with Bill and Frank. Maybe I loved it because it was so different from the game that I got to enjoy these new stakes in a relatively unknown narrative, especially because the end goal of the show and the game was the same, so it didn't really matter how they got there. But the episode felt like a really insanely good short film. The game is overall a darker, bleaker, and more miserable story than the show. And I will go into later how I generally prefer that for the story. But for Bill, I prefer his show story. It feels like such a glimmer of hope and kindness in this world that is full of death and cruelty at every turn. That these two guys got to experience a final 20 years that was full of life and love and companionship that they couldn't have had before the apocalypse, which is just so cool. Just a heartbreaking and beautiful piece of storytelling. Can you tell that Brokeback Mountain is one of my favorite movies ever? I know. I also really loved episode 5 with Henry and Sam. The action sequence was really cool in that episode. The story of Henry and Sam didn't quite blow me away like Bill and Frank in this iteration, but I think that's because I'm just so familiar with it. But I really enjoyed the changes that they made. I really liked that Sam was deaf, and I liked getting to see more of them than we did in the game, because the game is only able to show things from Joel and Ellie's perspective. I also really enjoyed Kathleen a lot, especially given what happens in part 2. I'll go into my thoughts related to the comparing the show to part 2 later, just so that my mom can see some of this. But I really liked the changes that they made expanding on Tess as well. I especially liked getting to see Ellie's mother's story, and of course getting to see Ashley Johnson, and getting to see my Ellie give birth to the new Ellie, which was very cool. Especially hearing her voice, which is always very nice. I also like how they adapted the ending, but I also think that it wasn't quite as effective as it was in the game. But it's still good. Joel's brutality of killing the Fireflies definitely still worked. The creator of the show, Craig Mazin, in one of the podcast episodes said these violent delights have violent ends when talking about the ending, which is a line from Westworld, but one that I think really applies beautifully here. Violence in this world is permanent and not something that people can escape from. My biggest gripe, issue, those feel like strong words because I do like the show, but my biggest issue is Joel. He's the only character whose changes I understood, but I didn't always like, again, mostly because of part 2, which I will elaborate on later. I feel like Joel in the game is a more angry and bitter person towards the everything in the world. He is not in touch with his emotions at all until towards the end of the game. He pushes against his feelings of love towards Ellie tooth and nail, and it makes sense because he has only processed his emotions through the lens of anger, because that was just how he was going to survive. Sarah's death in the game made Joel bitter towards the entire world, including Tommy and even Tess, someone who he didn't meet until afterwards. Joel and Tess didn't really have a lot of tenderness in their relationship in the game. They definitely cared about each other, but Tess doesn't really pull on that until she's dying and try to convince Joel to take Ellie. She has to pull out everything in her arsenal to get him to do it, and Joel feels like he does it out of a sense of obligation. In the game, he hasn't heard from Tommy in years, so he doesn't want to leave Boston until Tess begs him, putting another layer, making this decision difficult for Joel. Joel in the show, it feels like he's more eager to kind of take Ellie. And it feels like Tess doesn't have to work quite as hard. And also because there's the layer of Joel wanting to look for Tommy. In the game, it is not a decision that Joel wants to do. And because he's kind of guilted into it, it feels like the decision is harder for him in the game to make than it is in the show. Joel is just harsher towards Ellie in general. Ellie is a bit harsher too. Joel in the game is never in touch with his love or fear or anything until the David segment. The thing is in episode 6, I feel like that's when the biggest kind of change takes place. Joel in the show allows himself to feel love for Ellie and starts to feel fear that he won't be able to protect her. Obviously, in the game, that would never be a storyline because Joel is the player, and there would be no believability because Joel has just killed like 1,000 zombies and people by that point. He's extremely capable. Joel in the show tries to get Tommy to take Ellie by emotionally opening up to him about that fear and sadness of not being able to protect Ellie, which Joel in the game would never do. That conversation with Tommy in the game is an argument, and Joel pulls on Tommy's savior ideas where he's like, you can save the world, similarly to how Tess had to beg Joel to take Ellie. Joel in the game is afraid of his attachment to Ellie. Because he knows what it's like to lose a daughter and is deeply afraid of that happening again. And that fear manifests in anger and bitterness towards the people that he loves. He pushes everyone away so that he can never love and lose. Joel in the show is pushing Ellie away in a lesser way, but it's more because he is genuinely afraid that he won't be able to save her. Both Joels are afraid of loss, but they show it in opposite ways. Joel in the show is sad, where Joel in the game is angry. The big moment in episode 6, again, is the conversation between Joel and Ellie, where he tells her that she doesn't know what loss is. In the show, that conversation has a really sad undertone. Joel is extremely sad to be having this conversation, and Ellie is sad as well, but also frustrated. In the game, that conversation is a culmination of frustration from both sides. Ellie has run away from Jackson, and Joel has to kill raiders to get to where she's hiding, and he's so pissed at her for running away. She's pissed because she feels stupid for thinking that Joel cared about her. And that conversation has Joel basically confirming her fears. She is not his daughter, he is not her dad, and they will go their separate ways. He's pissed, she's pissed, but these emotions needed to get out because they had been building. She's begging him to cut the bullshit and be real with her, and he stubbornly refuses. Then on the ride back to Jackson, Joel is forced to think back on what he was really doing and realizes that it's too late and that he wants to be with Ellie on her journey. The game is much more subtle with how it approaches Joel's acceptance of Ellie's feelings, of his love of Ellie. And maybe because there is the level of gameplay, and that the show doesn't have that medium of storytelling to kind of get you to understand Joel's sadness. But you do understand Joel's sadness in the game, and I think that Joel finally putting aside his anger after letting it out feels more in character for him. In that moment, Joel accepts that he loves Ellie, and she knows that too, but going forward, Joel is again more subtle with how he shows it in comparison to the show. Until the David moment in the game when he stops her from extra killing David and showing her love by giving her a hug. It's a really big moment because this is a huge step for Joel to overtly show her love and to comfort her, because he is much more quiet about his love. Then in the next segment, when Joel is trying to make Ellie happy when they're in Utah by getting her to talk and get her out of her head, it's a bigger indicator that he has really changed. The change within him is more extreme in the game, and that moment really shows that. The change isn't quite as severe in the show, so it doesn't hit quite as hard. And Joel killing all the Fireflies isn't quite as brutal in the show, maybe because the show is already so violent, so it doesn't really feel shocking, but also because game Joel, when faced with the loss of the love that he has finally accepted, reverts back to that anger and violence that has served him well up to that point. I'd also like to point out that I think that another reason why Joel killing the Fireflies in the show isn't quite as shocking to me is because I'm watching someone else do it, whereas in the game, you as Joel have to kill the Fireflies. You get the guns, you have to shoot them. Like, it's it feels more visceral because I am the one executing it. Whereas I think also in the show that it's me watching someone else do it, which kind of makes it less personal in a way. Joel is more brutal in the game than in the show with killing the Fireflies, because Joel in the game is a more brutal person. In the show, it feels like more of a yuck moment, because Joel is not as brutal or angry. So him killing all these people doesn't necessarily feel like the next natural step. It still feels sad, and that's definitely how the scene is supposed to make you feel. But Joel even killing these people who are surrendering feels more extreme than it did in the game, because Joel in the show isn't quite as trigger happy as he is in the game. Again, I think that's another level of gameplay, because you as Joel are more trigger happy because you have killed a lot more people than Joel in the show has, just by like how the stories are told. In a video game, you kill far more people than you can in a show. So I think that, that kind of connection also, you have seen Joel kill a lot of people. You have killed a lot of people. So it feels like you're in video game logic in a way. So it's like, you have to save Ellie. Of course you have to kill the Fireflies. Whereas in the show, Joel is less kind of attracted to violence, just almost by nature of the medium. So he, it feels like a little bit of a stretch that Joel in the show would kind of go to that level of violence, as it's not really something that we have seen from him before, whereas in the game, it is something that we've seen from him before. Another thing is that in the end, when Joel is walking with Ellie back to Jackson in the game, again, he's finally talking about Sarah. He has not opened up to her about Sarah at any point before this, and him talking feels so much more like he's compensating for what he did. You definitely get that in the show too, but you feel it more in the game because it's such a change. And in the show, Joel has talked about Sarah before, even if it's just like offhanded remarks. In the game, Joel does not do that. So the first time he brings it up, it is definitely feel like he's compensating for what he has just done. But I will admit that this is definitely me nitpicking, and that you can absolutely enjoy Joel's character in the show more than the game if that's how you feel. But while I understand the changes that the show made, this is just my case for why I prefer the game. Or maybe I prefer the game because I've spent 115 hours on the first one and 77 on the second, so these versions of these characters will always be my version of the characters. So when I wrote this, I had only played The Last of Us 2 twice. I have since played The Last of Us 2, I think I'm at 5 times. So I've also played quite a lot of No Return. So that number 77 is a little too low. It's much higher now. But yeah, again, I will go more into why I think that Joel's brutality is important to his character, because it's not quite as important to his character in The Last of Us 1, but I do think it's really important to his character in Last of Us 2. So kind of, I feel like this is a little bit more open-ended in the segment, because I'm just saying why I prefer that Joel is brutal and kind of pointing out why I think he's more brutal. But you won't really get payoff for why I think that's more important until I talk about part 2. So stick around. Okay, so one thing that I want to talk about that is similar between the game and the show is the fan reaction to the end of the story. People are really jumping through crazy hoops to justify to themselves why they don't feel quite so conflicted by Joel's decision to kill the Fireflies and take Ellie. One of the takes that I have seen that drives me up the fucking wall is when people say that they couldn't have manufactured the vaccine anyway, so Joel was right to kill them. That is a take that matters so little to the story of the game that it baffles me that it has become somewhat dominant among fans of the game and show. Joel was not considering the ability of the Fireflies to actually make the vaccine. He wasn't looking at their data and equipment and coming to an informed decision that humanity was doomed anyway. He was making the selfish decision, objectively and completely. He was thinking that he did not want to lose a daughter again. We see how it goes down. Marlene tells him what's happening, and he immediately jumps into action to save Ellie. He doesn't take time to think about it. He doesn't weigh the pros and cons. He cannot lose Ellie, so he does everything in his power to stop it. The efficacy of the vaccine or the practicality of its distribution do not matter to Joel in the slightest. Therefore, it does not have any kind of bearing on his actions or the end of the story. Yes, I will admit that it is an interesting thought experiment. What if the Fireflies were making false promises? But to use it as a legitimate reason to excuse Joel is just wildly incorrect. People are disregarding the interesting take for the easy one, and it is easier to think that Joel was right than to really examine his actions and be challenged by them. The reason why you, the viewer, feel like Joel might have been right is because you empathize with him. You love Joel, you love Ellie. You just spent the whole game/show following them on their journey across the country. It can't all be for nothing. The viewer/player's version of it can't all be for nothing is different than what it means for Ellie. Ellie's final conversation with Joel before shit hits the fan is her telling him that they can't have risked everything to walk away empty-handed. They need to do everything they can to get a cure, otherwise everything they sacrificed was for nothing. However, the player/viewer does not have the same kind of dilemma that Ellie does, because we do not sacrifice what she does. The entire show and game has done its job to make us love her. Our priority is not the safety of the world, it is the safety of the characters that we love. So when faced with Ellie's death, it is natural that ours and Joel's immediate reaction is to protect the ones that we love. But people trying to really justify what he did by making it seem like Joel had the moral high ground is just very much against what the story is trying to make you feel. I like Joel's decision because I think it makes the game much more interesting, not because I think he is ethically correct. In fact, I enjoy the fact that he's not. If the vaccine would have worked, doesn't matter at all because it doesn't matter to Joel, who makes the final decision. This is a really good example of people losing the forest for the trees. Okay, now we can talk about The Last of Us 2. This is Ellie reacting to how bitches respond to her game. I swear to God, so many stupid people. Okay, so I will talk about my thoughts and feelings about the second game first before I talk about it in comparison to the show. Okay, so first when I talk about the second game, I will talk about the only non-spoiler aspect, which is the gameplay. This game feels much more like a video game than the first one. Levels are huge, and there are a million different ways to tackle each given encounter. You have so many tools at your disposal, and that lets you get really creative. Another thing that I learned this time around is that you don't have to kill every person or zombie in each level to win, and I love that. I played this game on hard this time around, which is, again, my second playthrough. And there's no fucking way I could have killed every single person in the game. Ammo and materials are so scarce, Ellie gets spotted so fast and dies so quickly that it would have been impossible. Instead, levels make you push a door open for a couple seconds to test if you stealth good enough or if you have enough of a head start to win. And I really love that. Truly makes the game feel more realistic. Sometimes, though, I really would kill everyone because I had no ammo, I needed to look through every nook and cranny of the level to get as much as possible, or I had a lot of ammo and I just felt like cutting loose. The flexibility for how you encounter these enemies are really cool. For my fourth playthrough, I played on hard and challenged myself to be extremely aggressive, which has been a fun challenge. Every time that I have played this game, I have gotten better at it, as one does. So I talk about how I kind of struggled playing it on hard for my second playthrough, and I don't, not to toot my own horn, but I don't really struggle anymore. At least not quite as much as I used to. But I'm not playing it on grounded or any of those crazy difficulties. So obviously there's still, room for me to improve. But yeah. Okay, so the meme about this game is that you have to look through a million file drawers to get maybe one bullet, and that is true, but also you could scavenge as much or as little as you want. The freedom of how you approach the combat sections really is new for Naughty Dog, given how restrictive Last of Us 1 is, but I do think that is thanks to an increase in budget, not necessarily a change in their design philosophy. Uncharted 4 is more open than Last of Us 1, but that kind of goes with the genre. Nathan Drake can fly around on a grapple hook and shoot a guy on the way down, but that obviously won't work for Joel. Another thing is that the enemy AI in this game is really good. Human enemies will notice their fallen comrades' bodies and get on their guard. They call out their friends' names when they die, and they also don't behave the same during each encounter. You can attempt a level 50 different times, and the AI will generally behave differently, which is really cool. It keeps repeated attempts fresh so you don't memorize where everyone is going to be every time, which is another added level of difficulty, but it's one that I enjoyed. The zombie sections are like that too. Zombies behave differently each time, but much less so than the humans. Another cool thing is that if you are behind cover, if a clicker yells in your direction, they will see you. The addition of stalkers and shamblers was also a very fun variety to gameplay, which made these sections hard too. I finished the game on hard, which is definitely a badge of honor for me, mostly because I suck at aiming a gun in a video game, but I do feel bad for Claire and Karsten, who had to watch me redo every single encounter at least 5 times. They watched me fight the Rat King, and boy howdy did that take me a while. Sorry guys, thanks for putting up with me. Again, I'm going to toot my own horn just a little bit and say that I no longer suck at aiming a gun in a video game, and I'd like to thank the 170 hours I've put into Resident Evil 4 Remake for helping me get better at shooting a gun in a video game, because that's probably why it's been easier to do repeated takes of this game, because I have gotten better at shooting a gun. That shocking, I know, that helps. Okay, so let's get into the real meat and potatoes of The Last of Us 2, which is the only thing people really care about, which is the story. I feel the need to note that when I first played the second game, I was so deep in the fucking trenches. I couldn't leave the house without having a panic attack. I was, in general, extremely fragile. I was probably not in the best mental space to play this game, but I had been looking forward to it for 6 years, so I was going to push through. Safe to say that my first playthrough was a pretty miserable affair for me. I felt ill every time I had to shoot a dog. The over-the-top violence didn't feel good for me. It just made my heart rate increase. Weirdly enough, I was also playing Doom Eternal for the first time as well, which helped me calm down, which, go figure. I literally played Ghost of Tsushima afterwards and was like, thank God, a lighter story. At least I can't see the dog's eyes when I kill them. Okay. So anyway, the first time I played this game, I didn't really enjoy it. I could see that it was objectively a good game with a really interesting story to tell, but I couldn't enjoy it. And I remember feeling really negative about having to play as Abby, which of course you're supposed to feel. But I did come around and I understood her perspective, but I just couldn't enjoy it. I do contribute that opinion to my overall mental health being so poor at the time, though. When the show came out, I decided to replay the first game because it just got me feeling for it. And then after I debated for literal weeks if I wanted to play the second game again because I remembered how miserable I was the first time, I finally bit the bullet and was like, okay, big girl pants on, let's go. And I am so, so glad that I did. Who would have thought that being in a much more mentally stable state allowed me to actually enjoy the game? The violence just heightened the experience and didn't make me miserable. Now I was able to recognize that it was an objectively good game and one that I enjoyed. My second playthrough has simply been a much more enjoyable experience than my first, because of my mental stability, and also I had the conversation that Joel and Ellie had about her wanting to work towards forgiveness with Joel in the back of my mind the whole time, which just gave so much more context to everything. Okay, so I absolutely love the story of this game. The characters, for the most part, are written, performed, and animated to perfection. I never thought that I would be able to pick up on many facial expressions in a video game, but I really feel like the animators are able to capture all of Ashley Johnson's facial acting, which really makes Ellie feel so human. This game cements Ellie as one of my favorite video game characters of all time. Her process of grief in a world that is violent at its core is so, so interesting and wonderful to witness. Her trauma and processing it as best she can while also starting a relationship with pregnant Dina is just so cool. I will get into her more later, but I do really have a soft spot in my heart for her. Okay, I don't know why I have that last sentence. Literally, I talk about Dina on the next slide. But I also love Ellie's relationship with Dina. I love that Ellie has a real relationship with someone, and that even though her romantic relationship with Dina is new, they clearly had a past friendship and mean a lot to each other. Dina is so devoted to Ellie and follows her to Seattle, even though they both know it's a long shot to be able to find and kill Abby, but Dina is going to support Ellie as much as she can. Dina also represents the future for Ellie, which I really love too. I'm really glad that Ellie had someone like Dina in her life, even if it wasn't forever. Okay, so Ellie's relationship with Joel is also deeply interesting. I cried 3 times playing this game my second time, and all of it was connected to Joel and Ellie's relationship. Once, when Ellie went to his house right after he died and saw a Space for Dummies book on his bedside table, Joel giving Ellie the space shuttle countdown in the museum and their final conversation. Just these little moments that made the loss feel so real, especially their final conversation, because it's like, oh my God, they were really going to have a new beginning in their relationship. And a new chapter was just starting, and it was just so cruelly cut short, making Ellie feel guilty about the last years that they had together were wasted by Ellie being angry at him for something that neither of them could change. And I love how Joel feels no regret at all for what he did. I think that is so true to his character. I think that him telling Ellie that if given the choice, he would have done it all over again makes her feel both miserable and feel loved. It's that dichotomy that defines a lot of their relationship in the final 2 years that they knew each other. Ellie loves him even when she hates him, and he respects her enough to give her space. Ellie said that this slide is about Ellie. Craig Mazin, the creator of the show, said that love can be a wonderful or terrible thing, talking about Joel in the show. And I really love that that theme continues into the second game, more than just with Joel and Ellie. I can't really think of many other stories that show the dark side of love and not have it be something perverted or fucked up or obsessive. Joel loves Ellie like a daughter, and that love has made him do terrible things to preserve. Ellie loved Joel like a father, and that love has made her do terrible things to avenge. The second game shows Ellie becoming more like Joel in general. She grieves like him, she becomes more comfortable with killing like him, she tortures like him, and overall her life is overwhelmed by the darkness that was Joel's life. When the game first starts, you're right there with Ellie. You're like, man, fuck Abby and the wolves, and then you keep playing as Ellie, and then the brutality increases, and you're just like, okay, girl, that's enough, and then it just keeps going. Ellie's section is about us losing touch with her, which is contrasted with Abby's, where we get in touch with her. Ellie loses herself in her grief like Joel did, and is finally pulled out of it for a little bit when Abby almost kills Dina. She is super duper injured as a result of her fight with Abby. Jesse is dead. Tommy and Dina are also really fucked up, and that's enough for her to pick up and go home. Ellie realizes that they took this as far as they were going to, and everyone needed medical attention, especially pregnant Dina, who was definitely concussed. I know that the decision to leave may have also been really difficult for Ellie, but she herself was in no state to fight anymore, which I think helped. I think that Ellie's character motivations and actions are so interesting and in depth, and I have more to say about her, but I'm going to focus on the other main character of this game first. Okay, so let's get into Abby. I really don't have much to say about Abby in general. I know, surprising, just because her story is more straightforward. I really like Abby. I need to just kind of put that out there for the record. Abby's section of the game obviously mirrors Joel's in the first, which is really cool. Abby reconnects with her lost humanity by taking in a child and rediscovers empathy by learning to love another. Obviously mirroring Joel, which is very cool. The difficulty of this game was to get us to empathize with Abby without the writers being ham-fisted about it and really going over the top, and I think that they achieved that. Lev is a character who we slowly grow to empathize with over time. We originally see him as just another scar, but then the more we learned about his struggles and life, the more interesting he gets. His story itself doesn't exactly reinvent the wheel, but the fact that he is trans is very cool and a nice twist on the typical kid falling out with their parent arc. We see him lose his sister, which also gets us to empathize with him more. Through learning about Lev, we also grow to empathize with Abby more. For me, I started, as soon as I realized that her dad was the scientist of the Fireflies, I immediately understood why she killed Joel, and I empathized with her. Sorry, I'm saying empathy a lot. It's a big theme. I'm going to keep using it. People complain that Abby being so muscular is not realistic in the apocalypse, which, of course, these people are walnut-brained monkeys. She lives in a big-ass compound that gives her access to healthy food whenever she wants, and she has access to a gym. Of course, she could get ripped if she wants to. Personally, I love her muscles. It makes her gameplay different from Ellie's, which is really important. No ammo? No problem. You can beat the fuck out of anyone as long as you dodge their attacks properly. You can do that as Ellie too, but Abby is a bit more of a tank, so it's more of an option for her. I really like Abby's gameplay. I also really like her character arc. It's not as unique as Ellie's, but the actual meat of it, despite the overall goal of her arc being the actual arc of it is something we've seen before, even if the goal of it is something new. Just because it's Joel's arc, which is absolutely deliberate. I saw someone on TikTok say that Abby got the best parts of Joel and Ellie got his worst parts, and it was just like, damn, yeah. Okay, so I love how lost she is when she comes back from Jackson, since tracking Joel down has dominated so much of her life up until that point, and now she has no big goal. She helps these kids who save her, and then the guilt that they would die without her makes it so that she can't move on. She grabs onto the kids super quick too, which I like because Abby is much more open to love than Joel was in the first game and is actively looking for love in her life. She sleeps with Owen to feel something, but I think that helps her put that relationship behind her in a sense. She will always love him, but things between them are different. So she needs a new purpose in life. Abby is not a cruel person, despite her killing of Joel being just insanely cruel. Abby knows what it's like to love and be loved, and she has felt that in two big instances in her life through her father and Owen. Now it's her turn to provide love, and I think that's a really important shift in her life. Since putting her quest for Joel behind her, she is turning over a new leaf in her life. She isn't aware of Ellie single-handedly culling half of Seattle's population until the damage was already done. She doesn't even dwell on it for long. She finds Ellie immediately, fucks everyone up, and then dips with Lev. So really, Ellie's killing spree doesn't really have that much of an impact on Abby's life trajectory too much, since she was definitely going to dip with Lev regardless. It's kind of fucked up for Ellie. Sorry, girl. Ellie absolutely altered the track of Abby's life forever by killing all of her friends, but more emotionally than physically. Abby's quest for revenge completely and utterly breaks Ellie and Tommy. Abby was in her own shitstorm, realizing that the war she was fighting was stupid. Of course, throughout, I grew to care about Abby as a person. She has this really cute moment where she is scared out of her mind crossing a tall bridge with Lev, and she feels so human in that moment. I really like Abby and what she does for the overall story of the game, and I enjoyed playing her section. What's funny is that the second time I played this game, I got lost in Ellie's section again, and I was like, man, I don't want to play as Abby, which is really funny because I already knew what happened and I liked her. I just got caught up in Ellie's quest again. Okay, so I have a lot to say about the ending. So Ellie goes to Santa Barbara to try to find Abby, and that's when she finds this fucked up motorcycle crew. I kind of wish we got a little more from them because I think they're really interesting. But anyway, Ellie sets all their prisoners loose, which definitely will put an end to that group. And then she finds Abby, and it's really shocking to see her. She's emaciated, and her hair has been cut, and she is just a shell of a person. Ellie cuts her down, and then Abby just barely registers her. She just gets up, frees Lev, and then is like, "Hey, Ellie, the boats are this way." And Ellie's kind of shocked still, so she just goes with it. And she's about to let Abby go, but then she flashes to Joel's death and is like, Abby, I can't let you leave. And Abby's like, are you fucking kidding me? No, we're done. And then they fight anyway, and it's just so miserable. Every time you as Ellie cut Abby, you cringe because she's just almost dead. She needs every drop of blood that she can muster. Ellie also has been stabbed and is bleeding out herself. Both girls are dying and just throwing every last ounce of energy into this, and it's just miserable. Then Abby bites off two of Ellie's fingers, and Ellie flashes to her last conversation with Joel, and then she lets Abby go. Ellie tells Abby to take him, and she's not talking about Lev. Up until that moment that Ellie lets Abby go, her life was defined by Joel's death. It haunted her every day, even after leaving Seattle. I also love that Ellie actually literally saved Abby's life. If Ellie stayed with Dina, Abby would have died. And I think that Seattle was when she was at peace with her decision to pursue Abby and with Joel's death because she was doing something about it. The approximate year she spent on the farm with Dina was just her quietly living and being haunted by Joel every day. We see the toll it takes in her diary, but she still tries for Dina and JJ until Tommy comes in and blows it all up. That scene and conversation was just so heartbreaking. Tommy extremely selfishly puts this quest on Ellie despite her wishes to move on because physically he can't make the trip anymore. Guilting her into going is such a cruel twist of the knife in her attempts at peace, and then she finds Abby and just lets her go. After that moment, we see that Ellie isn't haunted by his death, but lives how he did in those final years. Love is a fierce emotion and is a double-edged sword for both Joel and Ellie. Ellie's quest for revenge leaves her broken and entirely alone. Abby's quest for revenge leaves her almost entirely alone. She would have met Lev regardless of Ellie, but it still kills all of her friends. Their journeys strip them to their core selves, and in both cases, we see them that they are empathetic. The core themes of this game are empathy and forgiveness, which is an ironic statement to make because this game also is a display of just the extent of human cruelty and violence. both perpetrated by Ellie and Abby and friends and enemies alike. This game shows the true lengths that people will go with their anger, hate, and grief. But the character-defining moments for both Ellie and Abby are their moments where they are kind. Abby's quest to take care of Lev and Yara, two kids who make her realize that the conflict between the wolves and Seraphites is pointless. They give her a true purpose in life that is truly her own. Abby learns to love again after the death of her father, not through Owen, but through Lev. Abby finally finds a real reason to live. Ellie, when finally given the opportunity to kill Abby and supposedly silence her grief, she decides not to. She displays empathy towards Abby, not for her sake, but for Joel's. Look at how much they have changed from the first flashback to the end of the game. It's just, this quest has just completely broken both of them down. Their quest for revenge has just destroyed them. Through Ellie's flashbacks, with Joel, we see a bit about how their lives existed after coming back from Salt Lake City, and we see a really large change in Joel. It's like the hospital was his final cleansing of his violent self, his last large violent act that put that part of him to rest. Now he could live the life that he always wanted to, which is a dad. We see Joel mellow out, calm down, show Ellie how much he loves her even when she hates him. We see him take her to the museum for her birthday and how he is overprotective of her when she starts going on patrols, even after she learns the truth and hates him. We see him defend her from a bigot at the party, even if that's not what she wanted. We see Texas-born and raised Joel tell Ellie that he accepts her being a lesbian. Joel finally gets to live a life full of love. However, you can't escape your past no matter how much you want to. Joel's life and death are defined by large acts of violence, but in the end, Ellie chooses to honor the moments that were the most important to her and to him, that of love and forgiveness. The night before Joel's death was a new beginning for both him and Ellie. It takes Ellie losing absolutely everything to finally honor that fresh start. And for Ellie, because of her actions, she has to make that fresh start alone. She isn't angry when she goes to the farmhouse and finds it cleared out after leaving Dina to go to Santa Barbara. She isn't even really that sad. She just is. She makes a decision to move forward in life. She can't even play Joel's guitar anymore, losing her final ability to connect with him in truly his most happy moments. However, through that severance, she is able to make a new life for herself. We have no idea what that could look like, but we do know that she will forge forward alone. That life may not be great, it may be short, but it will be hers. When she leaves Joel's guitar behind, she is leaving behind not just him, but all ties to that life that she was living. Now she moves ahead, less burdened and free. Ellie and Abby's journey obviously mirror each other in some more obvious ways, but in the end, both of them are completely stripped of their desire for vengeance, any desires to re-explore ties to their old lives, and will forge life ahead for themselves. Love is a burden and the reason for living. Ellie leaves behind Joel's hate and love, but keeps forgiveness for herself because that was the first act that she did in their relationship that was entirely her own on her own terms. Abby leaves behind her hate for Ellie and is left with the bitter remains of love, having had it tortured out of her. But love keeps her going, and she will take Ellie's forgiveness with her for the rest of her life. One hateful act can inspire another, but a selfless action can also be contagious, and these kinds of moments are the ones that show us who we truly are. Only in the face of true grief can we know who we are, and Ellie and Abby both are selfless and hold the love that they have for others close to their hearts. The first game explores and elicits empathy in a much more straightforward way. Henry and Sam are easily likable characters, and their deaths are meant to make us feel something. We feel empathy for Tess in her final moments, for her wanting to make her death mean something. We feel empathy for Tommy and his desires to start a fresh life, but still agreeing to go forward with taking Ellie and Joel's stead. Most importantly, we feel empathy for Joel and Ellie, individually and together. We feel empathy for Joel's loss of Sarah and Ellie's desire to find a father figure and someone to love her and stick around. The second game decides to exhibit empathy in a much more interesting and difficult way. We feel empathy for Ellie, obviously. We love her. We love Joel. We hate Abby. Easy. But then the game makes us physically be Abby. We spend time as her, and it makes us feel empathy for someone we hate, which is such an interesting theme and an idea to explore, and one that I truly feel can only be accomplished through the medium of video games. I'm sure that when the show does a season 2, they will make a good job of us hating Abby and then liking her, but there's something about it being a video game that makes the whole experience more visceral. Naughty Dog, when making The Last of Us, really enjoys making the player do things that they do not want to do. They dipped their toes into this concept with the end of the first game, where you as Joel killed all the Fireflies, including the doctors trying to save the world, directly against Ellie's wishes. However, I do think that this doesn't quite have the desired effect. I think that I know that when the game first comes out, people were furious that you didn't have the choice in killing the doctors or not. The end was definitely meant to challenge viewers, and I think that in the beginning it did. However, the controversy at the end of The Last of Us kind of got lost, mainly because of the fans of the game being really fucking stupid and having the media literacy of an infant whose only previous exposure to media is the Boss Baby. Sorry, I'm referencing that meme here. Okay. Because people see this game and think, yeah, I don't want Ellie to die, and then Joel agrees with them. Yippee! Now you can save your surrogate daughter with Joel so that you don't have to feel loss either. I love not being challenged by stories. I think that people who are not quite as challenged by Joel's decision when faced with the trolley problem as Naughty Dog originally thought, so they were like, okay, you fuckers, you earned it. Time for Joel to play golf. When Last of Us made the decision to challenge the viewers, they were testing the waters, and Last of Us 2 took those infants and dunked them into the deep end. The way that The Last of Us 2 challenges viewers is a way that is unavoidable and impossible for those infants not to be challenged. The most smooth-brained babies didn't even play the game when they heard that Joel died, but that even the ones with a single wrinkle stopped playing after Joel died. A lot of those kids don't like to have their preconceptions of the world or characters that they loved being challenged. I talk about how people would choose the easy way out rather than the interesting one with the first game, but that idea is really cranked up to 11 here. People do not want to look inward and examine any bigger thoughts or ideas. They want the easy way out, so they create it for themselves. When I first saw the scene where Joel died, me and Claire just kind of sat on the couch in silence, shocked. We guessed that Joel would die because we couldn't figure out any other event that would motivate a story for a second game, but it was still, seeing it was gut-wrenching. Seeing it a second time is gut-wrenching too. This moment really tells players to get fucking ready because this game has some really grotesque gore that, in the words of Dunkey, makes you go, Jesus Christ. When Joel dies, you get the sense that there's a rift between Ellie and Joel, but you don't know the gravity of the separation until later. Abby's really in her Wii era. Nobody hand her the controller if you care about her Wii Sports PBs. Okay. I've heard criticism of the structure of this game, having both Ellie and Abby sections not giving the player all the information until you get all the flashbacks and kind of the jumping back and forth between timelines. And I fully understand if you feel that way, but I really do think that it is better for it. I think that the flashbacks for both Abby and especially Ellie are a much needed respite from the overwhelming violence, grief, and overall heaviness. The one criticism of the structure is the fact that you play all 3 days as Ellie and then go back in time to be Abby. I think that's a fine criticism. Especially because once you get to Abby's section, you are meeting her friends and immediately becoming disinterested in them because you know that you as Ellie killed them that same day. That definitely instills a sense of dread in a way when you see Nora alive and when you're in the hospital helping Abby, and then you're just like, ugh, girl, you don't know what's coming. But mostly it makes you disinterested in them. And also how Abby and Ellie's stories are pretty disconnected from each other. I fully get that criticism too, because Abby isn't aware of what Ellie's doing in Seattle, and Ellie isn't aware of what Abby's doing during those 3 days. However, I think that the separation is a good thing, even if I understand if you don't agree with me. The only criticism that I do agree with is that I don't care about Abby's friends when I meet them. Also, her friends are fucking assholes. Nora and Manny aren't so bad, but man, fucking Owen. And don't even get me started on Mel. Owen is a fucking dickhead. He gets Mel pregnant and then wants to dip because he's scared of being a father and because he doesn't actually love Mel. Insert consequences of one's own actions meme. He cheats on Mel with Abby and then fully plans on leaving her to chase after the Fireflies. Mel catches him and then he backs out like a pussy and is like, oh yeah, you can come too, I guess. Shit or get off the pot, man. And then, I mean, Mel hating Abby totally makes sense, and that is not something I will fault her for. But Mel leaving the safety of their camp at literal 8 fucking months pregnant to go on patrol in the week because before your group executes a literal fucking invasion against a group where tensions are rising to bursting, never mind the regular danger that exists, and it's like, yeah, I'll be fine. She's trying to prove to herself and maybe to Owen that she can still be useful, but bitch, you won't be useful when you're dead. This isn't like the risk that all pregnant women take when they get in a car. This is cranked up to oblivion danger. Then she goes to the fucking aquarium to try to grab her baby daddy and drag him back by the ear to be a father in the middle of a war. I'm sorry, when you are pregnant in the zombie apocalypse and you have a safe house, then why would you leave? Mel deserves to get domed for being stupid. Owen isn't quite as unnecessarily flippant with the life of his unborn child, so I guess I'll give him a pass. But I also don't care. He sucks. Abby's friends are the weakest part of her storyline for me, and I did come to respect even Owen and the way that he matters to Abby. Like, okay, girl, you're being stupid, but I also can't blame you. He was there for you when your dad died. When I first was replaying the second game, I had to sit and write out like 1,000 words of this in a frenzy because I had so many thoughts and feelings. I ended up calling my friend at the time, Grace, after 20 minutes of writing, and I just kept the opening page of this game open for the whole call because I just needed to sit there with it for a while. When you open the game, you see a boat slowly rocking on gray water with fog everywhere, and you don't know where the boat is. Then, when you see the ending, you see that the boat is one that Abby takes Lev away in after Ellie finds them in Santa Barbara. This is then when the game is finished, the opening images changes. Now it's the same boat, but the tide has gone out, so it's sitting on sand and the sun has risen. You see that the boat is indeed in Santa Barbara, and you see the big round building that is where the prisoners of the motorcycle gang were being kept. But I am obsessed with that image. The sun slowly coming up over the hills, the slow, lazy roll of the ocean, the white flags waving on the roof of the building. It's all so beautiful. And it's beautiful in a way that encapsulates the core ideas of the game really well. Because the game ends and you see the sun rising, the tide has gone out, the boat isn't rocking anymore, and more importantly, with the sun rising, you can see where you are. The gray fog and boat represent Ellie being lost in her grief. She doesn't know where she is and she can't think outside the immediate next step. Then with the new image, you see a little bit more and then just the immediate next step. It mostly represents the feeling that Ellie and the viewers have as well. The end image represents not necessarily the total inner peace that Ellie and the viewer feel, but the beginning of that inner peace, a new beginning. And it is such a beautiful, beautiful image, and one that is so simply and effectively conveys the game's representation of grief that when I saw the second image in my second playthrough, I had genuinely forgotten that it existed, and it just blew me away. That is such an insanely awesome attention to detail and made my brain ascend to the ninth dimension. The first image of the first game is mind-blowing too, but just kind of in a lesser way. It's just a window with the curtains slowly blowing in the wind with a bit of plants growing up and slowly overcoming it. It is more representative of the state of the world, but I also think that it shows that a bit of peace and beauty exists in this violent world. Just a simple window that could be in any number of houses in any corner of the world, but here it is existing in a quiet place with a nice breeze. But the fact that the opening image changes in the second game just kind of put me over the edge. This is me when boat. I know, I was going crazy. Okay, I think that the opening image reflects my overall thoughts about the game pretty well too. I'm really thankful that the show inspired me to replay the second game mostly, just because that is not a game that can be fully understood in one playthrough, and especially if that first playthrough is done by a coughing baby and the game is a hydrogen bomb. Now I have become the hydrogen bomb. Okay, so there are some things that the show is clearly inspired by by the second game for, and I think that's really cool. In the show, the one thing that I really like about Kathleen is that she is so obviously a warning and foreshadowing to Ellie about people losing themselves in revenge. I also like that she dies because she couldn't let go of her desire for revenge. Such a cool way to foreshadow what's to come without being obvious. Okay, so one thing that I really like about the second game is how much Joel changes through off-screen character development between games 1 and 2. We see that he calms down and lets down his guard, which ultimately leads to his death, but I think it's significant that Joel changes as much as he does. When Joel meets Abby, he is no longer in the mental state where he's got to run over a guy with his car because he ain't even hurt. Now he's not as cautious. The memory where he takes Ellie to the museum is like my favorite section of the whole game. And it really shows the ideal of their relationship. They really are father and daughter now, and that is significant because of where they both started, but they clearly have room to grow because Joel hasn't been honest with her about Salt Lake City. If Joel's journey towards acceptance of himself is shorter than that, I think that those moments won't hit quite the same, even if they're good nonetheless. Another thing that bothers me about the changes is that Ellie's quest to murder half of Seattle is that she becomes more comfortable with killing like Joel was. I think that it's significant that the violence is reflective of Joel's violence. Obviously, Joel in the show is okay with killing, but the scale that Joel kills in the first game and then Ellie becoming that, even if it makes her uncomfortable at first, I think it's important. It is her fall to darkness and becoming like Joel, having her grief manifest as anger and hate. So I think if Joel's arc in the first season of the show isn't rooted in the same emotions as Ellie's arc in the second game is, again, I don't think it will hit the same. The show seems to be going down the path that Ellie has this violence within her all along and that she has a violent heart. And in the game, she absolutely does. However, in the game, I think it's significant that Ellie falls down the path of violence that Joel did before and that he broke away from in his final years. We can only assume that she does the same. It seems like she does. I think it's significant that the first and second games are defined by Joel's largest act of violent love, and lessening that core of anger could change the heart of the story. Does that make me not a feminist if I want Ellie's violence to be tied to a man? Oh well. Another thing is that in the show, Joel tells Ellie that he almost killed himself and that life is worth living with her in it. I loved that moment, but I love that The Last of Us 2 made us wait to have that moment until the night before Joel died. In Joel and Ellie's conversation about forgiveness, Ellie says that she was supposed to die in that hospital because then her life would have fucking mattered. Joel, by telling her that he would do it all over again, is telling her that her life does have meaning. It has meaning to him. And I love that the game subtly shows that, and that the game waits until their final moments for them to have that understanding that they had never had up at any previous moment before it got taken away. I really like the theme that the second game that Ellie has to completely let go of Joel's love and hate in order to move on. But if that propensity towards violence was inside Ellie all along and Joel wasn't the source of it, then her leaving the guitar at the farmhouse again just won't hit the same. There's obviously going to be significant changes in the later seasons of the show, and I will obviously be open to whatever happens in those changes, but the changes in the first season will have a ripple effect into later elements of the story. Overall, I prefer the first game to the show, but I still think the show has its strengths. I will be very curious to see where they go next, especially since I've loved most of the new stuff that they have added. Anyway, the Last of Us games will forever mean just so much to me. They will always have a place in my heart, and I will always think fondly of them as they challenge the way that I consume media and think of characters. Also, side note, when I saw this shot of the show of Abby's dad's dead body, I swear to God, my brain did a hard reboot because Craig Mazin, you absolute fucking mad lad. What a cool comparison. And like, I mean, this is another instance where kind of having the second game in existence when making the first season of the show is a benefit because you can frame these two shots really similarly to even further show connections between Ellie and Abby, and I think that's just really cool. Okay, thank you for listening. That's all I have.